Steve, I wanted to start with you. How did you first come across this script, and what was it that you connected with that made you want to direct this project?
Well, these young producers, Josh Jason, and Molly Galula gave me the script. Josh and I work in a commercial company together, and he gave me the script. And of course, I asked him if he had seen any of my credits. And then he said he had, and he still was interested in me directing the movie, and I fell in love with it. The opportunity to kind of work to do a drama and to kind of investigate and to tell a story around the kind of emotional lives and crisis of the characters was something that was a great challenge for me. Much harder than I thought it would be. And so I was thrilled to do it.
Taylor, it's established really early on that Walker and Albee have this really extensive relationship and history. And because of the pandemic, you and Amber actually did not have the traditional rehearsal process that you normally would have. How were you able to build that bond through Zoom and through technology?
That's a great question, because that was very difficult for such a character-driven piece and something with such history between these characters. And so I think we were all going a little crazy during this pandemic, and I had a lot of time on my hand. I took it upon myself I wrote a list of so many questions to Amber, almost sort of like a speed dating sort of profile response. And I gave my responses to them. And I think she might have thought I was crazy at first, because we hopped on one call with Steve, Trent, the writer, Amber, and I, and we kind of just spoke about how we were all coming to this and where we saw our characters. And then, I think maybe 2 hours later, I fired off an email to her with so many pets, colors, what words do you like, don't like, just to have these sort of triggers. Because in a rehearsal period, you can find those and you can use those and keep them in your back pocket and pull out as you need through scenes. But without that, it's very difficult, and especially when you're playing two characters that are constantly prodding each other. But she responded, and I wrote them all down, and I went up to the woods with this information, and it worked out. But it was definitely one of the stranger emails I've ever sent anybody.
Can I just jump in and say that our first rehearsal was just surreal, because we're outside a lodge in a summer, at a summer camp, surrounded, in the woods. And we all, because of social distancing and early pandemic days, we had masks on and we're sitting in chairs, and I would have to say we're a good 20, 25 feet away from each other in a giant circle. And then we would read through scenes, and I started to just sweat profusely, because I was like, I don't think there's any emotional connection between any of these people. And I'm not sure how we're going to create that. And then it took me, I don't know, probably 45 minutes before I realized that, well, it's because you're sitting in chairs 25 feet away from each other, wearing masks, and no one can see each other. But it was just such an odd thing to consider how we were going to do it in that moment. And then after about an hour, I calmed down. I was like, oh yeah, but they won't have masks, and they'll actually be closer together and talking to each other. But it was a pretty interesting, the early days were pretty interesting in that way, and terrifying, I think, just because you don't have the normal, everyone hanging out and talking to each other across a table, eating dinner and talking about the movie. That was not happening. So we had to find it in the moment pretty much every day, because we would, there was no socializing really. You couldn't hang out after shooting. We were all at the summer camp night after night. So you would think we could all have drinks and drink wine on the picnic tables, but that wasn't happening. So we did have to actually find so much of it in the moment it happened, because it was the only time any of the actors saw each other without their masks on.
And that chemistry definitely comes across on the screen. Bethany and Nelson, in the midst of trying to help this young couple and their relationship, your two characters discover cracks in their own relationship. How did the two of you approach the dynamic between your two characters?
Something I thought was really interesting, I remember talking to Steve before we started shooting, is that they really do love each other. There really was something there, and we worked very hard to make sure that at the beginning you see the connection. You don't automatically think, oh, why is she with this guy, why is he with her, they clearly don't belong together. We don't, there's nothing given away at the beginning that that would imply that they should never have thought to be together, which I really loved. It makes it more complicated and nuanced as the story goes on.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's speaking about even just COVID, like that opening scene that kind of establishes our relationship is so key, because it's not much, and it's not like, you know, we're but it just shows that we really have a relationship. It's not for show, it's not fake, it's in, you know, there's a real intimacy and a real love there. And that was like the most intimate thing. You know, we were all like masked and then not masked, and you know, we weren't allowed to kiss, so we had to just like awkwardly gaze into each other's eyes. You know, but which still works. It still works. But that was an absolute COVID thing, that we just couldn't kiss. You know, and it was just like
we could just breathe heavily on each other.
Like, heavily breathe.
That was a great evolution that you both brought to your characters. Because in the writing, in the original script, and we talked to the writer about it as we were doing everything we did, there was some tension in the beginning of the relationship in the original script, just a little. And we were like, let's, you know, and talking to Bethany and Nelson, we were like, why? Like what should, or not why, should we give that away was the question. Because obviously, you know, Albee and Walker are in such like high crisis. Maybe we should show another portrait and not give anything away at all, and let the cracks slowly emerge as Albee and Walker, you know, invade their lives. And that was just because, you know, we were just all kind of in conversation, and I thought it was a brilliant idea. And so that's why Carly and Ben actually, that's why their scenes are like that in the beginning, because it was just a change we made that I thought was very, very smart.
I love that contrast that we get to see depicted in the film. This is a question for the entire group, but trust is such a key element of any production, but especially when you're filming during a pandemic. Steve, how were you able to create that environment on set? And then for the actors, how did that trust allow you to deliver the performances that we see on screen and then also play in this environment?
Well, I really trusted the actors and just kept telling them that every day. I'm like, the thing that you guys are feeling when you're in the scene, you know, the way you see your characters relating with each other, let's explore that right there in the moment. Because I said we didn't have that kind of rehearsal, so let's just see, bringing everything that you're bringing to the scene, let's explore it every day. And so and they're all brilliant actors, so I had enormous trust in them. And so then it was just a question for me as the director of finding, you know, what was best telling the story in terms of the emotional life of the character, and then in the larger kind of narrative. So that for me, it was just, you know, seeing what they did as a group and you know, and together and pairs, and then kind of exploring that and capturing it.
Yeah, no, the trust was, we went into it very sort of blind, but there was something nice. I've never really done it where we were literally in a camp. So like I was sharing walls with different castmates or people on the crew. And so there's an intimacy that comes from that, where you begin to trust, like, oh yeah, I see them in the morning. I see them at all times of the day. That really brought us closer throughout the entire thing. But we also had, we just had so much trust in Steve, and that really was what it was. And you kind of have to have that with your director. And we had a little bit of a false start with the very first night. I think we went to watch some dailies, which we didn't do again. But I think seeing that, seeing that as well after our first or second day of filming, it was like, okay, I see how this is looking, and that sort of informed the rest of what we were going to be doing. Of, oh yeah, like this looks beautiful. We have an amazing sort of setting for it. And you kind of surrendered to that, and the writing was great. So once you had done your character work, you kind of let it go from there.
Yeah. So, I mean, the great thing about the whole experience at, quarantine camp was that, it really was this interesting thing. We all bonded, and so many people, you did not know what they looked like until lunchtime when we were sat very far away and they have their masks down eating, like, oh my God, that's what you look like. And it's cool. And it was interesting as it went on. It was like because we're all together, it's also like a play. We have so much time to like speak about things, to like swap ideas. And then also it led to us like just really looking forward to the scene, because we got to act we got to see each other. We got to speak to each other like normal. We're acting in a scene, but also like in real life, acting like the world was not falling apart around us. So it's a really fun, interesting thing like to look forward to every day, to be like, oh, we get to do this, masks in our pocket and speak to each other. And it was us as actors were privileged to have that, whereas a lot of other people had to have the mask on the entire time. I mean, we even tried to do a water balloon with no ultimate frisbee day with Steve Pink is an excellent, exceptional,
incredible, honestly.
Yes, it really is. And we all played with masks on and almost died.